UConn-Tennessee, the greatest rivalry in women's basketball. UConn gets the largest win of the entire history of the series. We'll recap. This is Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Locked On UConn. I am Matt Schonvisky, a two-time graduate, 10-year credential media member, and host of the only daily UConn sports podcast, Locked On UConn. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and thank you for making this your first listen each and every single day. On today's show, we are recapping Sunday's UConn win over Tennessee. Then we'll recap some of the best moments in this storied rivalry. And finally, the Huskies and Volunteers have agreed to add a number of games to their series. What does this mean for the game of women's college basketball? But first, this episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work. That defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So UConn and Tennessee renew their rivalry on Sunday. The last UConn loss came in Knoxville last season. So revenge, top of mind. But the big thing I was looking for heading in, how does UConn respond to adversity? And boy, did they ever face adversity in this one. Because despite the game being 96-66, the largest margin of victory in this rivalry, it wasn't that way in the first half. Did UConn jump out? Yes. But Tennessee came storming back. And it looked there in the second quarter. Things were a little different. I think if you look at the UConn sideline, there was a little, for a spot, a few minutes there. A little different mentality than I've seen in the past. But true champions face adversity, look it in the eyes, and say, not today. And that's exactly what the Huskies did the rest of the way. So despite 42-42 at the half, UConn came out and put the Volunteers away, winning the third quarter by 18, the fourth quarter by 12, and we were left with a 96-66 victory, avenging last year's loss. With the win, UConn improves to 23-0 in the season. And Tennessee comes in top 15. What does that say about UConn's ability and what is going to transpire here as this season continues? Because this was really the only test the rest of the way that I see for the women. So when we first kicked off this podcast again, and we brought it back, and I took over this show, one of the first interviews I had was with Bob Joyce. One of the first questions I had, what was possible with this team? Is this team so deep that they're going to challenge some of the prior records and some of the performance and results of the great teams that have gone through here before in stores? Bob said, yeah, I think there's an opportunity here. It wasn't listen, this is a crazy question. No, because the reality of the situation is this UConn team is head and shoulders better than every single team that plays women's college basketball this season. We will find that out. More confident than ever, especially after seeing the result, especially after facing adversity, like I mentioned in the first half against Tennessee. I think it was the first time, listen to this, the first time the UConn women have trailed in the second quarter. all season. That's a crazy stat. Was on Sunday. Because Tennessee did take a lead. UConn refused to go in the half at a deficit. And Sarah Strong, Azzi Fudd. Oh, man. Azzi led the way with 27. Sarah Strong had 26. Azzi 5 of 8 from 3. 7 rebounds, 7 assists. It's what do you do in the big moments? And it's players like Azzi Fudd. You can't have a better game. Stepping up when your team needs you. Stepping up in primetime moments. Stepping up with the national spotlight. Looking down at you. And how do you respond in those moments? To me, this is probably her best game of the season. I don't care what any of the other stats say. 27 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals. Talk about stepping up when your best is needed. Talk about stepping up when your team needs you as you're looking at a deficit in the second quarter. That's what Azzi did. That's what this team did. That's what Sarah Strong did. 26 points on 10 of 18. She was 2 of 5 from 3. Perfect from the line. 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks. Sarah Williams, I thought, had maybe her best game of the season. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks. And this was a UConn team not at full strength. Because Blockner didn't play. So not only did perhaps your definitely, certainly, in my opinion, third best player, future of the roster, future of the program, face of the program, she wasn't on the court. And UConn still beat Tennessee by 30. What's a full strength UConn going to do? That's what the rest of the country has in store for them. Because UConn's blowing through the rest of this Big East Conference. No doubt, no question. Signed, sealed, delivered. Sign me up. It's happening. They will go undefeated and win the Big East tournament. And then it's NCAA tournament time. And an opportunity to do something that only the greats have been able to do. The great teams at UConn have been able to do. And that's run the table. And listen, I talked yesterday about what that win for the men did from my perception of what's going to transpire after they did what they did to Creighton. This game further reinforces the fact that, not that I needed any added proof, but this team is certainly going to run the table this season, in my mind. So we'll see how things play out here the rest of the way. But listen, 30 plus each of the rest of the games this season, that's what I foresee. And I think a game like this, where things weren't ideal in that first half, having Azzi step up the way she did. 17 shots, 27 points. Didn't even get a free throw. Did not get to the line. They shot 82% from their line. If you go back to some of my concerns, it was free throw percentage. It's been addressed. Hasn't been an issue, for a month? Month and a half? They won the Battle of the Boards, 39-30. Shared the rock, 25-16 assists. Turned Tennessee over 20. They did turn it over 15 times as well. That was something that surprised me in terms of Tennessee's pressure got to them a little bit early. But UConn cranked up their own, and that certainly had an impact on the game. 14 steals. So a great showing on Sunday. People's Bank Arena in Hartford, 96-66 final. UConn now 23-0. Which leads me to, we had something happen that's never happened in the history of this rivalry. Let's look back at some of the key moments in the rivalry. And that's what we'll do after the break.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. The WNBA has released its 2026 schedule featuring a 44-game regular season beginning on Friday, May 8th. The league's historic 30th season includes expansion teams Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, with opening weekend highlights such as Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever hosting Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings, and a rematch of the 2025 finals between the Aces and the Mercury. In college hoops, South Carolina handed Vanderbilt its first loss of the season with a dominant 103-74 win. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Back in on Locked On UConn, and we are continuing on the women's basketball side. UConn-Tennessee, that's what today's show is all about. They played 28 times. UConn leads the series 18-10 now. After the largest victory in this history of the series, 30 points happened on Sunday. UConn had lost a few in a row heading into this week, heading into Sunday. And yes, revenge was on the mind. But what has made this rivalry and this matchup so great over the years? Well, let's summarize, because I want to talk about some of the key moments between these two. Because it's been not just great games, but the quality of players, the talent that have moved on to the professional ranks post time in college. The Olympians, the gold medalists. Every time these teams meet, it's memorable. And it dates back to 1995, the start of the rivalry between Gino Auriemma and Pat Summitt, the legendary coach, Pat Summitt, Hall of Famer. She built Tennessee into what they were. National titles, UConn 12, Tennessee 8. Final Four appearances, UConn 24, Tennessee 18. NCAA tournament appearances, Tennessee 41, UConn 34. 80% winning percentage for UConn, 79.3 for Tennessee. Wins, 1,471 for Tennessee, 1,304 for UConn. You're talking about the two best basketball programs in women's college basketball history. And when Gino Auriemma and the UConn Huskies arrived on the scene, I don't think anybody, including Pat Summitt, including Tennessee, including women's basketball, knew what was coming. 95, the national championship. That's when this really came to the forefront, this rivalry. Rebecca Lobo, Kara Walters, Jen Rosati. They played again in 96. UConn won again. And then it was Tennessee's turn. 3 straight wins. Shamika Holtzclaw, Samika Randall, Tamika Catchings. Talk about a roster. Talk about talent. Talk about the marquee matchups between these two programs. And then it was UConn's turn to dominate. When UConn won 4 of the next 5 national championships. As UConn then took over after Tennessee won 3 straight, UConn won 9 of the next 11. With Sue Bird, Asa Jones, Swin Cash, Tamika Williams, Diana Taurasi. You continue the list. All those gold medalists. And then Tennessee reloaded after that Taurasi run. Candace Parker won every single matchup against UConn. It was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's what makes rivalries great, right? It's not when one team dominates. What makes a great rivalry is when it's competitive, when you have talent on both sides, when you have legendary coaches on both sides. And these matchups were the main focus of this college basketball world. Women's basketball, call it, even above and beyond the WNBA. Anytime UConn and Tennessee battles, it was the game. Because of how each of those coaches built their programs. I remember in 95, just about 10 years old at the time. UConn took over the state that year. It was all about UConn, Tennessee for the national championship. And that sparked an interest level in this program that completely took off. Both here in the state as a fan base, but also once Gino showed that you can win here and what his staff was able to do from a recruiting standpoint, there was no turning back. No turning back. And it was a win like the one they got over Tennessee that really changed the trajectory of this UConn women's basketball program. After 2007, you started to see, so after the first 12 seasons, you started to see that this rivalry wasn't exactly what it used to be. It wasn't as marquee because it just wasn't two programs at the top of the game. Because what UConn and Tennessee's success did for the game, they helped grow the game. And you had other schools try to replicate what each of those programs were doing. And you saw the development of some of those top programs and teams that went up against UConn and Tennessee over those years. They started to get into the coaching ranks. They started to look at what was successful, what was working at Tennessee, what was working at UConn. And you start mimicking that. And you start selling your programs. And that led to parity in the women's game. In 2006, it was the first time in more than a handful of years that UConn nor Tennessee made the Final Four. And then they stopped playing. There were recruiting issues, obviously, between Pat Summitt and Gino Auriemma. I think a visit at ESPN headquarters during a recruiting trip sparked one of those, right? But UConn didn't play for 13 years. They didn't play Tennessee for 13 seasons, a disservice to the game of women's college basketball. But it resumed in 2020, and UConn won all 4 matchups. And then last year, Tennessee came back and got a win. So I talked about what's good for the game, what's good for a rivalry. Yeah, Tennessee came out and they kind of reset themselves, right? Pat Summitt. Everybody knows the story. God rest her soul. But it took a while for Tennessee to get back up on top and get back to a place where they were consistently ranked and competitive against top competition. And yes, Tennessee was ranked after that, after Pat Summitt left the program. But they didn't have a quality team to compete and defeat UConn. Because if you look at margins of victories, 20, UConn by 15. 21, UConn by 6. 22, UConn by 19. 23, UConn by 17. Year off, played in 25. Tennessee had reset itself, took down UConn by 4. The last loss, February 6, 2025. Almost a full year Later this week will be a full year since UConn's last loss on the hardwood. And then you got to battle for that first half on Sunday. And when you see that orange and you see those UConn colors on the court, the memories just float back. And what sparks a memory for me, anytime I see UConn-Tennessee, I immediately think of 1995. Sean McDonough on the call on CBS, national championship game. So this rivalry is something that I want to see continue because it makes the game better when you have these matchups. And I hope it gets heated like it used to because this was must-see TV back in the day. And it was must-see TV on Sunday. And it moved the needle. The arena was packed. And we need more of these. And that's exactly what we're going to get. And we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. That's exactly what you get with Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches, and with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Back in our final segment, and we are still talking UConn and Tennessee. And news that broke the day before the Huskies and Volunteers renewed their rivalry, what was to be the final matchup on the schedule between the two programs. The two have agreed in principle to meet over the next 2 years to extend the series that really is the rivalry in women's college basketball. UConn will again travel to Connecticut in 2026-27. So next year, back-to-back years, UConn will host the Lady Vols. And UConn will return the favor to Tennessee the following season. So this will now mark 4 straight seasons that UConn and Tennessee will play. My question is, why aren't we going out even further? Why aren't we doing this for 10? The fan bases want it. I'm sure the coaching staffs want it. High-profile game. The TV partners and the TV networks want this game. Why are we only doing 2? This should be a perennial, yearly, annual game. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see, especially as, in this day and age, women's basketball is now where it is. Nationally. Relevant. These type of games move the needle even further. And for these two programs, Tennessee and UConn, as a UConn fan, this is something that I circle on calendars. Must-see TV. Even if I was not doing this show. Obviously something that I would want to see. Something that moves the needle. Like UConn and Tennessee. So I hope that this 2-year extension, or this 2-year contract, is not the end of this rivalry in the regular season. Because I envision, especially as Tennessee is now starting to get good again, I envision some further matchups in the NCAA tournament. Now, it all has to do with seeding and placement of programs, but I think these teams are good enough to say, hey, probably over the next handful of years, there's going to be more than just one matchup. there will be a matchup outside of the regular season. At least that's why I envision. That's what I hope too. Just from a fan standpoint. These games mean something. These games matter. These games move the needle, like I said. And it's great for the sport of women's basketball, who continues to gain relevance nationally. These type of markets, these type of matchups promote the sport even further. And in a time and a place where the women's game is being more and more competitive, these types of matchups also will move the needle from a recruiting standpoint to ensure that these programs are continuing to get the best players each and every single season. So for somebody from the outside looking in with the women's program, somebody that talks about women's basketball, I want to see this game every season. And I think you, the fans, probably want the same. And we're going to get it at least through the next two and hopefully beyond. But this extension means that Sarah Strong will play Tennessee every single year in her college career. All 4 seasons. So it's a great thing for UConn. It's a great thing for Tennessee. It's a great thing for the game of women's basketball. It's a great thing for the fan bases of each school and for the fans of the sport of women's college basketball. So that is everything we've got for today's show. Later today, we will preview tonight's UConn-Xavier matchup as UConn looks to build off of what they did out in Creighton on Saturday night. So as we close, we want to make the everydayer a cool thing to be. The truest fan is the everydayer. You reward your everydayers, and we do that here as well. If you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. Please visit lockedonpodcast.com/everydayerclub. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/everydayerclub. And as always, go Huskies!